She was considered dead for 7 years, her name etched on a memorial stone, and her memory preserved only in faded photographs and tearful reminiscences. Then, in a twist that defied all logic and expectation, she appeared in the cockpit of a commercial airliner after the pilot collapsed, gripping the controls with the confidence of someone who had never been lost. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from. On March 15, 2025, the world believed that Captain Mary Smith had been dead for exactly 7 years. The anniversary passed like the 6 before it, with John and Linda Smith placing fresh flowers beside an empty coffin at Arlington, their tears no less bitter than when they first fell. At Edwards Air Force Base, her former squadron maintained their solemn tradition, leaving an empty chair at their annual memorial gathering. They raised glasses to the brilliant test pilot lost during a classified mission so secret that even her grieving parents received only vague condolences and a precisely folded American flag. Mary's brother Michael, now a commercial pilot himself, wore her dog tags beneath his uniform every March 15th, touching them during turbulence as if his sister's legendary skill might somehow flow through the metal. But 35,000 feet above America, United Airlines Flight 847 carried a passenger the world had declared dead. Mary sat quietly in seat 23A, her military-trained eyes constantly scanning her surroundings while appearing to simply gaze out the window. The Boeing 777 soared smoothly through clear skies, carrying 340 unsuspecting souls from Los Angeles to New York. Mary's hair was different now, shorter, darker, and thin-framed glasses completed the transformation. The woman who had once commanded experimental aircraft worth millions now wore faded jeans and an unremarkable black sweater. Nothing about her suggested the decorated officer who had vanished without a trace over hostile territory. She watched the landscape pass beneath her, cataloging landmarks with the precision that had made her exceptional in the cockpit. Her pulse remained steady at 60 beats per minute, the result of years of training to remain calm in the most extreme circumstances. While other passengers dozed or worked on laptops, Mary remained vigilant, her body relaxed, but her mind continuously processing every detail: the slight turbulence pattern, the timing of the flight attendant's movements, the barely perceptible change in engine pitch. 7 years of living as a ghost had only sharpened her senses. She could identify exit routes in any situation, assess threats in microseconds, and blend into any environment. Today, she was just another passenger returning home, though home existed now only as a concept, not a place. Mary took a sip of water, her fingers steady around the plastic cup. The plane banked slightly, beginning its long arc toward New York. She never expected to return to American soil, yet here she was, anonymous among strangers, carrying secrets that would remain buried, unless circumstances forced her hand. 7 years earlier, Mary Smith had been handpicked for a mission that existed only in whispers. Her superiors at Edwards Air Force Base recognized something exceptional in the test pilot: a rare combination of technical brilliance, nerves of steel, and adaptability that made her perfect for the impossible. When they approached her, Mary knew accepting meant erasing herself from the world, at least temporarily. "Your country needs you," they had said, the weight of those words settling heavily in the small, windowless room where classified missions were born. Her parents, John and Linda, would receive nothing but a folded flag and carefully scripted condolences. No details, no closure, just the understanding that their daughter had died serving her country. Mary had earned her reputation through years of pushing experimental aircraft to their limits. She could speak 4 languages fluently, navigate by stars alone, and fly so precisely that radar operators often lost track of her even without stealth technology. These weren't just skills, they were her identity. The mission seemed tailored for her abilities, infiltrate hostile airspace, gather critical intelligence, and return undetected. The briefing had been meticulous, every contingency planned for, every escape route memorized. What no one anticipated was the catastrophic systems failure that occurred as she crossed into North Korean airspace. One moment, Mary was piloting the most advanced stealth aircraft ever built. The next, warning lights flooded her cockpit as the experimental jet began to lose altitude. Below her stretched miles of forbidden territory. Above, the night sky offered no sanctuary as enemy radar locked onto her failing aircraft. 2 missiles launched, their fiery trails cutting through darkness. Mary's training had prepared her for 2 options: eject and face capture, or maintain course and likely die. In that moment of truth, Mary chose neither. Banking sharply, she guided her wounded aircraft toward a densely forested mountain range. The missiles followed, but she used the terrain to her advantage, skimming treetops and forcing her pursuers to detonate against the mountainside. With remarkable skill, she managed a controlled crash into a remote valley, the aircraft disintegrating around her as she ejected at the last possible second. As Mary parachuted into the wilderness, she made her decision. The world would believe she died that night. Her superiors, her squadron, even her brother Michael, who followed her into aviation. It was safer that way. For everyone. Landing in enemy territory with nothing but her survival kit and training, Mary Smith became a ghost, a woman who would spend the next 7 years navigating a dangerous path home through shadows and secrets, developing skills her instructors never imagined she would need. Mary Smith vanished into North Korea's unforgiving landscape the night her stealth aircraft went down. The world mourned a hero while she became something else entirely. A shadow moving through hostile territory with nothing but her training and instinct. For the first year, she survived by avoiding detection, learning to blend with the local population. Her linguistic fluency became her shield as she adopted the mannerisms and habits of those around her. She dyed her hair black, stained her skin darker, and practiced until her accent disappeared. The military pilot ceased to exist. In her place stood a woman who could disappear in plain sight. Underground networks became her lifeline. Mary connected with smugglers, dissidents, and those living in the margins of society. She traded information for protection, medical supplies for safe passage. Each night, she memorized escape routes from whatever temporary shelter she found, never sleeping more than 3 hours at a stretch, always alert for the footsteps that might mean capture. By the 3rd year, she had crossed into China, then Mongolia, moving like a ghost through borders that would have been impenetrable to others. She collected identities like others collected souvenirs. A French aid worker in one province, a Canadian teacher in another, an Australian journalist somewhere else. Each persona was meticulously crafted, then discarded when it served its purpose. What began as survival transformed into something more. Mary started gathering intelligence, military movements, weapons transfers, terrorist cells, information so valuable that she created encrypted channels to feed it back to American intelligence without revealing her existence. The data she provided prevented 3 major terrorist attacks and exposed a network of nuclear material smugglers. The woman who emerged from these years was no longer just a pilot. She had become a master of deception, able to read threats in the slightest changes of expression, capable of disappearing completely within seconds. Her body bore the scars of close calls, a knife wound across her ribs from an encounter in Guangzhou, a bullet graze along her thigh from a midnight escape in Vladivostok. By the 7th year, Mary had worked her way across Asia and Europe, finally securing a perfect American identity, complete with backstopped documentation. She was heading home, not to reveal herself, but to continue her work from American soil. The military training that had once taught her to fly experimental aircraft had been supplemented by hard-won wisdom from the world's darkest corners. When she boarded United Airlines Flight 847 that March morning, no one saw a ghost or a spy or a pilot. They saw only what she wanted them to see: an unremarkable passenger in seat 23A, watching the clouds and keeping her secrets. Captain Robert Davis checked the instruments with practiced precision, his 15 years of commercial flying experience evident in every calm movement. The Boeing 777 cruised smoothly at 35,000 feet, carrying 340 passengers across American skies from Los Angeles to New York. The afternoon sun streamed through the cockpit windows, casting a golden glow across the control panels. "Weather looks clear all the way to JFK," Robert remarked to his co-pilot, Jennifer Johnson. She nodded, reviewing the flight plan with methodical attention. Without warning, Robert's hand froze mid-motion. A strange expression crossed his face: confusion, then alarm. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came. His right arm went limp, dropping heavily to his side. "Captain?" Jennifer's voice rose in concern. "Robert, are you okay?" The seasoned pilot slumped forward in his seat, his body suddenly slack against the restraints. Jennifer's training kicked in immediately, though her heart hammered in her chest. "Captain Davis is down," she called into her headset, alerting the cabin crew. "I need medical assistance in the cockpit now." Her voice remained remarkably steady, betraying none of the fear coursing through her veins. Her hands, however, trembled slightly as she took primary control of the massive aircraft. The autopilot continued functioning, but the sudden absence of the captain's guidance created an immediate crisis. "Los Angeles Center, this is United 847, Jennifer radioed. We have a medical emergency with the captain, requesting priority handling." The controller's voice crackled back with immediate concern, but Jennifer was already dividing her attention between flying and monitoring Robert's deteriorating condition. His breathing had become labored, his face ashen. Outside the cockpit, life continued normally. Passengers watched movies, dozed in their seats, or chatted quietly, completely unaware that their lives now hung in the balance. A flight attendant served drinks in business class, smiling professionally while her colleague rushed toward the cockpit with the emergency medical kit. The aircraft began to drift slightly off course as the autopilot struggled to compensate for changing wind conditions, something Robert would have adjusted for automatically. Warning indicators flashed subtly on the navigation display, demanding attention Jennifer couldn't fully provide while managing both the aircraft and the medical emergency. "Stay with me, Robert," she whispered, checking his pulse while simultaneously correcting their heading. The responsibility of 340 lives pressed down on her shoulders like a physical weight. In the cabin, a flight attendant discreetly approached seat 23A, where Mary Smith sat gazing out the window, her thoughts seemingly 1,000 miles away. "Excuse me," the attendant whispered. "Are you a doctor by any chance?" Mary turned, her eyes sharp and assessing, instantly alert in a way that seemed almost military. "No," she replied carefully, "but I might be able to help. What's happening?" Dr. Sarah Brown rushed through the narrow aisle of the Boeing 777, medical bag clutched tightly against her chest. The flight attendant's urgent call for a doctor had interrupted her review of conference notes, but the cardiologist's training kicked in immediately. "Let me through, please," she said firmly, pushing past concerned passengers who craned their necks to see what was happening. The cockpit door opened to reveal a scene of quiet crisis. Captain Robert Davis lay slumped in his seat, his complexion ashen, breathing labored. First Officer Jennifer Johnson looked up with barely concealed panic in her eyes. "I'm a cardiologist," Sarah explained, kneeling beside the captain. Her experienced fingers found his pulse, weak and irregular. His pupils responded sluggishly to light, and one side of his face drooped noticeably. "He's had a massive stroke," she whispered, her professional demeanor masking her alarm. "He needs emergency care now." She glanced at the navigation display, calculating the grim reality. "How far are we from the nearest airport?" Jennifer swallowed hard. "At least 2 hours from any suitable landing site." The first officer's hands trembled slightly as they moved across the controls. Though she had thousands of flight hours, she had never faced commanding such an enormous aircraft alone during a life-threatening emergency. Sarah administered what care she could with her limited supplies, positioning the captain to maintain his airway and monitoring his vital signs. "I can keep him stable for now, but he needs a hospital. Every minute counts with stroke victims." Jennifer nodded, her jaw set with determination, despite the fear evident in her eyes. She keyed the radio, her voice cracking only slightly as she declared, "Mayday, Mayday, Mayday. This is United 847. Medical emergency. Captain incapacitated. Requesting immediate assistance and priority landing clearance." The air traffic controller's voice came through, professional but urgent, requesting details and position. As Jennifer responded, Sarah noticed the first officer's white-knuckled grip on the controls. The responsibility for 340 souls now rested entirely on her shoulders. Outside, the vast blue sky stretched endlessly, beautiful and terrifying in its isolation. Inside the cockpit, the rhythmic beeping of instruments and the captain's labored breathing created an atmosphere of mounting tension. "Can you fly this alone?" Sarah asked quietly, continuing to monitor her patient. Jennifer hesitated before answering. "Yes, it's what we train for, but it's not ideal." She glanced at the empty seat beside her, then back to the complex array of instruments, especially not for landing. Fear crept silently into the cockpit, an unwelcome passenger that settled between them as they soared at 35,000 feet, far from help, with precious minutes ticking away. Jennifer Johnson's voice trembled slightly as she relayed their coordinates to air traffic control. The weight of 340 lives pressed down on her shoulders, while Captain Davis lay motionless beside her, his breathing shallow and labored. Dr. Brown had stabilized him temporarily, but the situation remained dire. "Mayday, Mayday. This is United Airlines Flight 847. Captain incapacitated. Requesting priority landing clearance at JFK," Jennifer said, fighting to keep her voice steady. The controller's response crackled through her headset. Asking for details she barely had time to process. Behind her, the cabin door opened with a soft click. Jennifer was too focused on the instruments and emergency protocols to notice. A woman in simple jeans and a black sweater slipped into the cockpit with a quiet confidence that seemed to command the space instantly. The lead flight attendant had started to object, but something in the woman's expression, a mixture of authority and absolute certainty, had silenced any protest. The stranger moved with purpose, her eyes scanning the cockpit layout with practiced efficiency. There was nothing remarkable about her appearance. Medium height, athletic build, brown hair pulled back, yet her presence filled the confined space with an unmistakable aura of competence. Jennifer was midway through confirming their fuel status when she sensed movement behind her. She spun around, startled to find someone standing so close in the restricted area. "First Officer Johnson, I'm here to help." The woman's voice carried a calm authority that seemed impossible given the chaos unfolding around them. Her gaze swept across the instrument panel, lingering on the altimeter, navigation displays, and fuel gauges with a familiarity that sent an involuntary shiver down Jennifer's spine. The way the stranger's fingers hovered near the controls, the way her eyes tracked the flight path displayed on the screens, this was no ordinary passenger. This was someone who understood the complex systems of a Boeing 777 intimately. "How do you know my name?" Jennifer demanded, her hand instinctively moving toward the emergency communication button. The aircraft gave a slight shudder as it encountered turbulence, and the stranger reached out to steady herself against the back of the captain's seat with the practiced balance of someone accustomed to movement at altitude. "That's not important right now," the woman replied, her focus unwavering as she glanced at Captain Davis's unconscious form. "What matters is getting these people safely on the ground." She leaned forward slightly, studying the weather radar with narrowed eyes. "You've got a developing storm system ahead, and you're going to need help navigating around it. "Who are you?" Jennifer demanded, her voice pitched higher than usual. Protocol and panic wrestled for dominance in her mind as she stared at the intruder. The cockpit was sacred space. No unauthorized personnel allowed, especially during an emergency. "You're not allowed in here." The stranger maintained a composure that seemed almost supernatural given the circumstances. She moved with deliberate precision, scanning the instrument panels with practiced eyes. The woman placed a steady hand on Jennifer's shoulder, the touch somehow both reassuring and commanding. "My name is Mary Smith. I'm a military-trained pilot," she stated, her voice carrying the unmistakable cadence of someone accustomed to being obeyed. "Right now, the only thing that matters is getting these people safely on the ground." The authority in her voice was impossible to ignore, carrying a weight that made Jennifer's protests die in her throat. The first officer studied Mary's face, searching for deception, but finding only determination. Through the cockpit windows, clouds raced past as the massive aircraft continued its journey, completely unaware of the drama unfolding inside. 340 souls depended on what happened in the next few moments. "Military? What branch?" Jennifer asked, still hesitant but increasingly aware that Captain Davis's condition left her in an impossible position. The unconscious pilot's breathing was shallow, his skin ashen. "Air Force," Mary replied, her eyes never leaving the instruments. "Test pilot. I've logged thousands of hours on aircraft more complex than this one." She gestured toward the navigation display. "You're drifting off your assigned heading. 2 degrees correction to the right." Jennifer instinctively made the adjustment, then realized she'd just followed orders from a complete stranger. "I should call for another commercial pilot." "There's no time," Mary interrupted. "Look at your fuel reserves and the weather system ahead. Every minute counts." Her fingers hovered near the communications panel, not touching, but clearly familiar with its layout. Dr. Brown appeared at the cockpit door, her medical bag clutched tightly. "Captain Davis needs immediate medical attention at a hospital. His condition is deteriorating." Jennifer felt the weight of responsibility crushing down. 340 passengers and crew. A dying captain, a storm ahead, and now this mysterious woman claiming to be a pilot whose confidence seemed to fill the cramped cockpit. "How do I know I can trust you?" Jennifer whispered, her training battling with desperation. Mary's eyes softened momentarily. "Because right now, First Officer Johnson, I'm all you've got." She straightened her posture, the momentary vulnerability vanishing. "And because those people back there deserve our best chance." Jennifer Johnson hesitated, her training and protocols battling against the undeniable expertise radiating from this mysterious passenger. The cockpit's warning lights cast an eerie glow across her face as she gripped the controls tighter. "I need to see identification," she started, her voice firmer than she felt. The rulebook was clear: no unauthorized personnel in the cockpit, especially not during an emergency. "There's no time," Mary interrupted, her focus unwavering as she scanned the instrument panel with practiced efficiency. "Your captain is dying, you're low on fuel, and there's a storm ahead. Look at your radar." Against her better judgment, Jennifer glanced down at the weather display. Her stomach dropped. A massive storm system was forming directly in their path, exactly as the stranger had indicated. The turbulence would be severe, potentially catastrophic given their current situation. "How did you know that?" Jennifer whispered, her professional composure momentarily cracking. Mary didn't answer the question. Instead, she leaned forward, pointing to the fuel gauge. "You've got about 40 minutes of flight time at current consumption. The diversion to Philadelphia will take 35 with headwinds. We need to make decisions now." This woman hadn't just noticed the storm. She calculated their fuel reserves and alternative landing options within seconds of entering the cockpit. No ordinary passenger could do that. Behind them, Dr. Brown was still working frantically on Captain Davis, whose breathing had become increasingly labored. The medical professional caught Jennifer's eye and gave a subtle headshake. The situation was deteriorating. "I could be court-martialed for this," Jennifer muttered, her mind racing through regulations and emergency protocols. "And I could be arrested for being alive," Mary replied cryptically, her hands already moving toward the communications panel with practiced precision. "But right now, there are 340 people who don't care about either of those things." The aircraft shuddered slightly as they hit the first edge of turbulence. Jennifer made her decision. She slid aside, allowing Mary better access to the secondary controls. "If you really know what you're doing, help me plot the new approach," the first officer said, her professional training finally yielding to pragmatism. "But I'm still pilot in command until proven otherwise." Mary nodded, a ghost of a smile crossing her face. "Understood, Commander." Her fingers danced across the navigation system with a familiarity that was both reassuring and deeply unsettling. As Jennifer watched this stranger confidently reprogramming their flight path, a troubling thought surfaced. Whoever this woman was, she knew this aircraft better than someone who had merely studied aviation. She flew like someone who had lived it. Mary slid into the jump seat with practiced ease, her hands moving across the controls like a concert pianist returning to a familiar instrument. The cockpit's complexity, a maze of switches, displays, and indicators that would overwhelm most, seemed to welcome her touch. Boeing 777-300, flight level 350, airspeed 480 knots, about 180 miles to JFK. "What's your fuel state?" she asked, eyes scanning the instrument panel methodically. Jennifer Johnson stared at the woman, her professional composure momentarily shattered. This wasn't just someone with casual aviation knowledge. The stranger had instantly assessed their aircraft type, altitude, speed, and distance to destination with the precision of someone who had spent thousands of hours in similar cockpits. "We're at 7,000 pounds above minimum landing," Jennifer replied automatically, her training kicking in despite her confusion. "How did you know all that just by looking?" Mary's fingers danced across the navigation display, checking their position against the approaching weather system. "When your life depends on reading instruments correctly, you never forget," she said, her voice carrying the weight of experience that went far beyond commercial aviation. Jennifer watched as the mysterious passenger adjusted the radio frequency and checked the engine parameters without hesitation. The movements were fluid, economical, nothing wasted, nothing for show. This was muscle memory built through years of high-stakes flying. "You've flown this aircraft before?" Jennifer asked, torn between protocol and the undeniable expertise before her eyes. "Similar systems," Mary replied, her focus unwavering as she calculated fuel consumption rates and optimal descent profiles in her head. "Military variants have comparable layouts. The principles don't change." Dr. Brown appeared at the cockpit door, her medical bag clutched tightly. "Captain Davis is stable for now, but we need to land as soon as possible." Mary nodded, acknowledging the physician without breaking her concentration. She was already plotting contingency routes, factoring in the approaching storm front, calculating crosswind components for possible emergency landings. "First officer," Mary said, addressing Jennifer with quiet authority, "we need to prepare for an expedited approach. The weather system moving in from the west will complicate our landing if we don't stay ahead of it." Jennifer's shock deepened with each passing second. This woman wasn't just knowledgeable. She was thinking 3 steps ahead, processing multiple variables simultaneously, making split-second calculations that meant life or death for everyone on board. In 15 years of flying, she'd never seen anyone, not even the most seasoned captains, display such natural command of an aircraft and its systems. "Who are you?" Jennifer whispered, a mixture of awe and apprehension in her voice. Mary's eyes remained fixed on the instruments. "Right now, I'm just someone trying to help you get 340 people safely on the ground." Jennifer's mind raced as she gripped the control yoke. The situation was spiraling beyond anything covered in her training. "I can't just let a passenger fly the plane. There are protocols." Protocols assume someone else is qualified, Mary replied, her fingers already dancing across the communications panel. She was coordinating with approach control on a secondary frequency with the confidence of someone who had done this countless times before. Right now, I'm your best chance. Every second counts. The cockpit filled with a tension that thrummed between fear and extraordinary hope. Outside, storm clouds gathered on the horizon, visible through the reinforced glass. Inside, the first officer struggled with an impossible choice. "This is completely against regulations," Jennifer protested, though her voice lacked conviction. She glanced back at Captain Davis, whose ashen face reminded her of their dire circumstances. Dr. Brown was still monitoring his vitals, her expression grim. Mary's eyes never left the instrument panel. "I understand your position, but right now, 340 lives depend on making the right call, not the regulation call." She adjusted the heading slightly, compensating for crosswinds before Jennifer had even noticed the drift. "How do you know so much about this aircraft?" Jennifer asked, watching as Mary effortlessly navigated the complex systems of the Boeing. "Let's just say I've flown more complicated machines under worse conditions," Mary answered, her focus unwavering as she calculated fuel consumption rates in her head. The radio crackled with an urgent message from air traffic control. "United 847, confirm your emergency status and pilot situation." Jennifer hesitated, looking at the mysterious woman beside her. There was something in Mary's demeanor, a steadiness that seemed impossible given the circumstances, but inspired trust despite every rule in the book. "They need an answer," Mary said quietly, "and we need their full cooperation for what's coming." Jennifer made her decision. Taking the radio, she responded, "Air traffic control, this is United 847. We have a medical emergency with our captain, and we have assistance in the cockpit." Mary nodded approvingly, already plotting their approach path on the navigation display. The tension in the cockpit shifted subtly, from paralyzing uncertainty to focused determination. "I hope you know what you're doing," Jennifer whispered. Mary's lips curved into the barest hint of a smile. "So do I." She reached for the intercom, her voice transforming into something steady and reassuring as she addressed the passengers, never betraying the gravity of their situation. In that moment, Jennifer realized she was witnessing something extraordinary, something that defied explanation, but might just save them all. Mary's hands moved across the control panel with practiced precision, her fingers adjusting settings and calculating variables faster than Jennifer could follow. The Boeing's complex systems seemed to respond to her touch, like an extension of her own body. She plotted their emergency descent path while simultaneously monitoring fuel consumption and weather patterns. "We need to drop to flight level 270, Mary announced, already initiating the descent. "There's a pocket of clear air below this turbulence that will give us a smoother approach vector." Jennifer watched in amazement as this mysterious passenger effortlessly coordinated with New York Center on the radio, her aviation terminology flawless and her tone commanding respect from even the most seasoned controllers. "United 847, confirm your emergency status and estimated arrival," the controller's voice crackled through the headset. "Center, we're maintaining controlled descent. Captain still unresponsive, but stabilized. Request priority landing at JFK, runway 4 left if available. Estimating 23 minutes to touchdown," Mary responded without hesitation. After a brief pause, the controller asked the question Jennifer had been dreading. "United 847, please confirm qualifications of your emergency pilot." Jennifer froze, her hand hovering over T. What could she say? That a passenger had taken control? That a stranger who claimed to be a dead test pilot was now flying 340 souls through a storm? Mary gave her a reassuring nod, eyes never leaving the instruments. "New York Center, emergency pilot has military background, highly qualified." Jennifer finally transmitted, the half-truth burning in her throat. "Copy that, United 847. You're cleared for priority approach. Emergency services standing by." As Mary plotted their emergency glide path, She maintained a calm demeanor that somehow spread throughout the cockpit. Even Dr. Brown, who had returned briefly to update them on Captain Davis's condition, seemed to draw strength from Mary's confidence. "The captain's vital signs are stabilizing, but he needs a hospital immediately," Sarah reported. 18 minutes, Mary replied without looking up. "Tell the cabin crew to prepare for landing." When they were alone again, Jennifer studied the woman beside her. The way she anticipated wind shear before it registered on instruments, how she balanced fuel conservation against their need for speed. The almost supernatural awareness of the aircraft's capabilities. A mixture of dread and awe swirled in Jennifer's mind. This woman handled the massive passenger jet with a skill that went beyond training. It was instinct, born from thousands of hours in the air, and situations Jennifer couldn't begin to imagine. "Who are you?" Jennifer whispered, more to herself than expecting an answer. Mary's eyes flickered briefly toward her, then back to the instruments. "Right now, I'm just the person getting this plane on the ground." As the aircraft began its emergency descent toward New York, the cockpit fell into a tense silence, broken only by radio communications and the steady hum of instruments. Jennifer finally gathered the courage to ask the question that had been burning inside her since this mysterious woman had taken control. "Who are you really? Where did you train?" she whispered, eyes darting between the approaching skyline and the stranger beside her. Mary's hands remained steady on the controls, but for the first time since entering the cockpit, she hesitated. Something flickered across her face, a shadow of memories long buried. The first officer noticed how the woman's shoulders tensed slightly, her jaw tightening before she answered. "Edwards Air Force Base, 412 Test Wing," Mary replied, her voice softer than before. Then, after a pause that seemed to stretch across years, "Call sign, Ghost." The words struck Jennifer like a physical blow. Her hands froze over the throttle controls as the implications washed over her. Every pilot worth their wings knew the legend of the test pilot who'd vanished 7 years ago, the woman who had broken altitude records in experimental aircraft before disappearing during a classified mission. That can't be possible," Jennifer stammered, her professional composure cracking. "Mary Smith died. They recovered wreckage. There was a memorial service broadcast on military channels. And yet, here I am," Mary responded, her eyes never leaving the instruments as she adjusted their approach vector. She coordinated with air traffic control with practiced precision, requesting emergency landing clearance at JFK. Jennifer studied the woman's profile, noting the small scar near her temple that hadn't been visible in the memorial photographs, the slight hardness around her eyes that spoke of years seeing things no one should. This wasn't just someone who knew how to fly. This was a pilot whose skills had become legend, whose disappearance had changed military testing protocols. "How?" Jennifer whispered, even as they began final approach procedures. Mary's lips curved into the ghost of a smile. "That's a much longer story than we have time for right now. Focus on our descent profile. We're coming in steeper than standard. I need you to monitor our speed." The New York skyline grew larger through the windshield as the massive aircraft descended through layers of clouds. Jennifer found herself following Mary's instructions without question, her training overriding her shock. Whatever impossible story lay behind Mary Smith's resurrection, one thing was undeniable. The woman beside her flew with a skill that bordered on supernatural. "For now," Mary added quietly, "let's just focus on getting these 340 people safely on the ground." "That's impossible," Jennifer murmured, her voice barely audible above the hum of the aircraft's engines. She stared at the woman beside her, trying to reconcile the ghost story every pilot knew with the flesh-and-blood person handling the controls. Mary Smith from the 412 died. There was a memorial. She's buried at Arlington. Mary's eyes were haunted, reflecting years of secrets and survival. For a moment, the cockpit fell silent as she absorbed Jennifer's words. the reality of her own death in the minds of others. "Have you ever seen a ghost fly a plane?" she finally asked, a hint of dark humor in her voice. As they broke through the clouds, Mary took command, her hands steady as steel, her face unreadable. The New York skyline emerged through wisps of cloud, the city sprawling beneath them like a circuit board coming to life. Jennifer watched in awe as Mary adjusted their approach with minute corrections that spoke of thousands of flight hours and instincts honed in situations far more dangerous than this. The first officer found herself torn between protocol and the undeniable skill of this impossible woman. "They told us you died over hostile territory," Jennifer said, her professional demeanor momentarily cracking. "At the academy, they teach your evasive maneuvers. You're literally in the textbooks." Mary's fingers danced across the throttle controls, making a slight adjustment for wind shear. "Textbooks," she repeated softly. "Funny how they write your legacy while you're still breathing." The radio crackled with instructions from JFK approach control. Mary responded with perfect procedure, her voice betraying nothing of her extraordinary circumstance. "Your family," Jennifer ventured. "Do they know you're—" "No," Mary cut her off, her focus unwavering. "No one knows. Not my parents, not my brother. It was safer that way." The aircraft banked gently as they aligned with the runway. Below them, emergency vehicles were already assembling, their lights flashing against the tarmac. "How do you just disappear for 7 years?" Jennifer asked, unable to contain her curiosity despite the crisis at hand. Mary's expression shifted almost imperceptibly. "You stop being yourself. You become someone new every few months. You learn to forget who you were." She paused, checking their altitude. "The hard part isn't disappearing. It's remembering who you really are when it's time to come back." The cockpit fell silent again as both women focused on the approaching runway. Dr. Brown appeared at the door, giving a quick update on Captain Davis's condition, stable but critical. As the massive aircraft descended toward JFK, Jennifer realized she was witnessing something beyond an emergency landing. She was watching a resurrection. Jennifer Johnson watched in awe as Mary Smith's hands moved across the controls with uncanny precision. Despite the bizarre circumstances, a sense of calm had settled over the cockpit. Every passing minute deepened Jennifer's trust in this woman who had appeared from nowhere, this ghost who flew with supernatural intuition. "Slight turbulence ahead," Mary announced, adjusting the throttle before the first bump could even register on their instruments. She banked the aircraft gently to avoid a pocket of rough air that hadn't yet appeared on radar. "How did you know that was coming?" Jennifer asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Mary's eyes remained fixed on the horizon. "The cloud formation, the pressure readings. You feel it in your bones after enough time in the air." The first officer studied her mysterious companion's profile, focused, determined, yet somehow distant, as if part of her existed somewhere else entirely. This wasn't just skill. It was something beyond training. Mary anticipated each shift in the atmosphere seconds before instruments detected it, compensated for wind shear that hadn't yet materialized, and managed the complex systems of the Boeing with an intuition that bordered on prescience. "Ladies and gentlemen," Mary spoke into the intercom, her voice steady and reassuring. "This is your flight deck. We're making good progress toward JFK and expect to land in approximately 20 minutes. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened as we may encounter occasional light turbulence." Jennifer marveled at how Mary's voice betrayed nothing. Not the emergency, not her exhaustion from years of living as a ghost, not the weight of her impossible existence. The passengers would never know they were being guided by someone who officially didn't exist. "They're responding well," Jennifer noted, glancing at the cabin status indicators. "Usually during emergencies, we get call buttons lighting up everywhere." "People respond to confidence," Mary replied, making another minor adjustment to their heading. "They don't know why, but they can sense when they're in good hands." It was true. The entire aircraft seemed to breathe easier. Flight attendants moved with purpose rather than panic. Even Dr. Brown, still tending to Captain Davis, appeared more composed, as if the aircraft itself had absorbed Mary's calm competence. "You've done this before," Jennifer said. It wasn't a question. A ghost of a smile crossed Mary's face. "Let's just say I've flown in worse conditions than this." As they began their approach to New York, Jennifer realized she was witnessing something remarkable. Not just a rescue, but a resurrection. For 7 years, Mary Smith had been a memory, a legend, a name on a memorial. Now she was their salvation, guiding 340 souls through the sky with hands that seemed to know the future. Dr. Sarah Brown hunched over Captain Robert Davis in the cramped space behind the cockpit, her medical training kicking into overdrive. She'd created a makeshift treatment area, using the limited first aid supplies to stabilize the captain as best she could. His vital signs were weak but present, a small victory in this airborne emergency. His blood pressure's dropping again. She glanced up at Mary Smith, who sat with perfect posture at the controls, her movements precise and economical. The mysterious woman hadn't shown a moment's hesitation since taking the co-pilot's seat beside Jennifer Johnson. "How much longer?" Sarah whispered, pressing her fingers against Robert's wrist, counting each faint pulse. 8 minutes, Mary replied, eyes never leaving the instruments. Her voice carried the calm certainty of someone who had faced far worse situations and survived. "Emergency teams are waiting." Jennifer monitored the communications with air traffic control, her initial skepticism about Mary now replaced with unmistakable respect. "JFK has cleared all other traffic. We have priority approach on runway 4 right." Mary nodded, making minute adjustments to their descent path. "Perfect. Tell them we'll need immediate medical transport for the captain." Outside the aircraft windows, the sprawling metropolis of New York came into view as they descended through the clouds. The massive passenger jet responded to Mary's touch like an extension of her own body. The Boeing 777 gliding through patches of turbulence with remarkable stability. In the main cabin, passengers remained largely unaware of the life and death drama unfolding. A flight attendant had announced they would be landing slightly early due to a medical situation, but few suspected the gravity of their circumstances or that their lives now rested in the hands of a woman who had been declared dead for 7 years. As the aircraft approached JFK Airport, Mary executed a textbook approach. The massive jet touched down with such precision that passengers barely felt the transition from air to ground, just the gentle bump and the reassuring roar of reverse thrusters. "Nice landing," Jennifer said, genuine admiration in her voice as she assisted with the post-landing procedures. Mary allowed herself the briefest smile. "Let's get these people safely to the gate and the captain to a hospital." As they taxied toward the terminal, emergency vehicles converged on their position, lights flashing against the afternoon sun. For the first time in 7 years, Mary Smith had stepped out of the shadows, and 340 souls were alive because of it. The Boeing 777 shuddered to a complete stop on the tarmac at JFK Airport, its massive frame finally at rest after the harrowing journey. Emergency vehicles converged from all directions, their flashing lights painting the aircraft's white fuselage in alternating red and blue. Inside, passengers remained seated, many unaware of how close they had come to disaster. In the cockpit, Jennifer exhaled deeply, her shoulders dropping as the tension of the past hour began to dissipate. Mary's hands remained steady as she completed the shutdown procedures with practiced efficiency. "You did it," Jennifer whispered, awe evident in her voice. Before Mary could respond, the cockpit door burst open. 3 officials in dark suits entered, followed by uniformed airport security. Their expressions were a mixture of confusion and suspicion. "I'm Agent Rebecca Miller, FBI," announced a tall woman with sharp eyes and an authoritative stance. She surveyed the scene, gaze lingering on Mary sitting in the captain's seat. "We received reports of an unauthorized individual in command of this aircraft. "Ma'am, we need to see your ID immediately." The agent's tone was professional, but laced with skepticism. Her hand hovered near her holstered weapon, a subtle indication of the gravity of the situation. Mary turned slowly, her movements deliberate and calm. "Of course, Agent Miller." She reached into her pocket and produced a military identification card, handling it with the casual familiarity of someone who'd done this countless times before. Agent Miller accepted the card, examining it closely. Her expression shifted from suspicion to confusion, then to something resembling shock. The color drained from her face as she read the details again. "This can't be right," she muttered, looking between the ID and Mary's face several times. "This shows active duty status, current clearances." She paused, swallowing hard. "But according to our records, Mary Smith died 7 years ago during a classified operation." The other officials exchanged glances. One stepped forward to examine the ID himself. "The credentials are authentic," he confirmed after a moment. "All security features present." "But how?" "I understand your confusion," Mary said, her voice steady. "I'm sure you'll want to make some calls to verify my identity. In the meantime, there's a captain who needs immediate medical attention." As if on cue, Dr. Brown appeared at the cockpit door. "The medical team is ready to transport Captain Davis. He's stable for now, but needs hospital care immediately." Agent Miller nodded, still visibly shaken. "We'll need statements from everyone involved. And you," she addressed Mary directly, "will need to come with us for debriefing." She handed the ID back with reluctance, as though returning something impossible. "I expected nothing less," Mary replied, rising from her seat. The ghost pilot had returned to the world of the living, and the questions were only beginning. The secure room at JFK Airport buzzed with tension as Agent Rebecca Miller paced back and forth, her phone pressed to her ear. 3 other FBI agents stood guard, while military officials from the Pentagon joined the call via secure video link. Jennifer Johnson sat in the corner, still processing everything that had happened. "This doesn't make any sense," Agent Miller snapped, gesturing toward Mary Smith, who remained eerily calm. "We have death certificates, funeral records, even a plot at Arlington. Yet her military identification shows active duty status, with clearance levels I've never seen." Mary sat with perfect posture, her hands folded on the table. 7 years of living in shadows had taught her patience. The confusion around her was expected. She had, after all, been legally dead since 2018. "Ma'am, I need you to explain this discrepancy," Miller demanded, ending her call. "Either you're committing identity fraud on a massive scale, or the United States government created my death for reasons above your clearance level," Mary finished, quietly. The door opened as a silver-haired man in civilian clothes entered. Everyone except Mary straightened noticeably. "Director Collins," Agent Miller acknowledged with surprise. The director nodded to Mary. "Captain Smith, it's been a long time." Mary's eyes revealed nothing. 7 years, 2 months, 14 days, sir." Collins turned to the others. "I need the room. This conversation is now classified." When only Mary, Jennifer, and the director remained, Mary finally revealed the truth. Her death had been carefully orchestrated when her reconnaissance mission in hostile territory went sideways. Rather than being captured or killed, she disappeared into the underground, becoming the ghost her call sign had predicted. "For 7 years I gathered intelligence across 16 countries," Mary explained, her voice steady, as she recounted living among terrorist cells, tracking weapons shipments, and infiltrating organizations that threatened national security. "I prevented 3 major attacks on American soil. Nobody could know I existed." Jennifer listened in stunned silence as Mary described surviving in the world's most dangerous places, constantly changing identities, never staying anywhere long enough to be discovered. "Why come back now?" Director Collins asked. "You were our most effective deep-cover operative." Mary's composure finally cracked slightly. "Because even ghosts get tired, sir. And when I saw that aircraft in trouble, I knew I couldn't watch 340 people die when I could save them. The director nodded thoughtfully. Your reappearance creates complications. I'm aware, Mary replied, but those passengers are alive. Captain Davis is alive. Some things are worth complicating. The revelation of Mary Smith's survival sent shockwaves through the secure debriefing room. Senior military officials exchanged glances as classified documents were spread across the table, revealing a 7-year operation that had remained hidden from even the highest levels of government. Mary's covert work had prevented 3 potential wars, exposed 17 illegal weapons deals, and saved countless lives across 4 continents. You infiltrated the Kharkov network? Asked Agent Miller, her skepticism dissolving into astonishment as she reviewed the intelligence reports. Mary nodded silently, the weight of her secrets visible in the lines etched around her eyes. For 7 years, she had lived as a ghost, slipping between identities, gathering information that had shaped world events without anyone knowing the hand that guided them. Outside the facility, a different kind of revelation was unfolding. John and Linda Smith sat in a private waiting room, their hands intertwined so tightly their knuckles had turned white. They had visited Arlington every year on the anniversary of their daughter's supposed death. They had watched memorial services where generals spoke of sacrifice while knowing nothing of the truth. I don't understand, Linda whispered, tears streaming down her face. 7 years, 7 birthdays, 7 Christmases. John pulled his wife closer, his own eyes glistening. She's alive, Lynn. Our little girl is alive. When the door finally opened, Mary stood there, not in military uniform, but in simple civilian clothes. For a moment, no one moved. Then Linda rushed forward, embracing her daughter with such force that both women nearly fell. John joined them, his large frame enveloping both in a protective circle. Why couldn't you tell us? Linda asked between sobs. We mourned you every day. Mary closed her eyes, the practiced composure of years threatening to crumble. I couldn't risk your safety. What I was doing, there were people who would have used you to get to me. Michael arrived last, having flown in from his Air Force base in Colorado. The young pilot stood frozen in the doorway, staring at the sister he had eulogized. In his hand, he clutched the dog tags he had carried every day since her memorial service. Mikey, Mary said softly, using the childhood nickname only she had ever called him. He crossed the room in 3 strides, pulling the metal tag from his pocket. I never believed you were gone, he said, his voice breaking as he pressed the tags into her palm. Not really. As Mary closed her fingers around the cool metal, the reality of what she had sacrificed truly hit her. She had saved strangers, prevented disasters, but at the cost of the people who loved her most. The wound of her absence had been reopened, but now, perhaps, it could finally begin to heal. In the sterile confines of a military psychiatric facility, Mary Smith sat across from Dr. Eleanor Wright, her fingers tracing invisible patterns on the armrest. The weight of 7 years lived as someone else, multiple someone else's, had left fractures in her sense of self that no medical scan could detect. Sometimes I wake up and don't know which name to answer to, Mary confessed, her voice steady despite the admission's gravity. I've been 16 different people in 7 years. I've spoken 5 languages daily, lived by different rules, different histories. She paused, eyes focused on something beyond the room's walls. The aliases don't just wash off. The psychiatrist nodded, making notes as Mary described how she automatically counted exits when entering any space, how she positioned herself with sight lines to all doors, how civilian life felt like another undercover assignment, one without clear protocols or extraction plans. Last night, I reached for a weapon that hasn't been under my pillow for months, she said. My brother Michael found me sweeping the house at 3 in the morning. He didn't say anything, just made coffee and sat with me until sunrise. At the Smith family home, the joy of resurrection had given way to the complicated reality of reintegration. John and Linda Smith had preserved their daughter's room like a shrine, but Mary couldn't sleep there. Too exposed, too many windows. She'd converted their basement instead, the lack of natural light somehow comforting after years of hiding. "They want their daughter back," Mary said, "but that person doesn't exist anymore. Not completely." Her parents tried to bridge the gap with family photos and childhood stories, desperate to reclaim the years stolen from them. Linda prepared Mary's favorite childhood meals, while John drove her to familiar places, hoping to anchor her to her pre-mission self. Their efforts were loving, but sometimes suffocating, highlighting the distance between who she was and who they remembered. The Air Force, recognizing both her exceptional skills and her struggle, offered Mary a position training elite pilots for deep cover operations. The role would utilize her hard-won expertise while providing structure and purpose, a bridge between her classified past and uncertain future. "You understand things no textbook can teach," her commanding officer had told her. "These pilots need someone who's walked through fire and returned." Mary considered the offer carefully. Teaching others to survive what she had endured might help her integrate her fractured selves. The dutiful daughter, the ghost operative, the unexpected hero, and whoever she might become next. "I don't know if I can be what everyone needs me to be," she admitted to the psychiatrist, "but I'm starting to think that's not what recovery looks like." On a clear spring morning 1 year later, Mary Smith stood on the tarmac at JFK Airport, surrounded by the crew and passengers whose lives had intersected with hers in the most extraordinary way. The sun glinted off the sleek passenger jets taking off in the distance, a sight that once represented her secret past but now symbolized a future reclaimed. Captain Robert Davis approached her with steady steps, a remarkable recovery from the stroke that had nearly claimed his life at 35,000 feet. The seasoned pilot extended his hand, emotion evident in his eyes. "You gave me a second chance," he said simply. "Not just at life, but at being a father to my children." Behind him stood Jennifer, now Captain Johnson, her new rank insignia catching the morning light. The transformation in her was evident. Confidence had replaced uncertainty, her experience during those critical moments having accelerated her career and shaped her leadership. "You redefined what's possible," Jennifer told Mary, her voice steady with admiration. "They're using our case study in pilot training now." The ghost who flew again. Mary smiled at the nickname, no longer flinching at the reminder of her past. Her parents, John and Linda, stood nearby, their faces a complex mixture of pride and lingering disbelief. The past year had been filled with difficult conversations, tears, and the slow rebuilding of relationships, fractured by secrecy and absence. Her brother Michael approached. The dog tags he'd kept for 7 years now returned to their rightful owner. "The Air Force wants you back as an instructor," he said. "But Mom's hoping you'll stay closer to home this time." Mary nodded, understanding the pull of both worlds. The military psychiatrist had warned her that reintegration would be the hardest mission she'd ever face. Harder than surviving in hostile territory. Harder than landing a massive aircraft in an emergency. Dr. Sarah Brown joined the gathering, her medical expertise having kept Captain Davis alive during those critical minutes. "Some miracles come with a medical explanation," the cardiologist said with a smile. "Others arrive in seat 23A. Agent Miller watched from a respectful distance, her initial skepticism transformed into grudging respect after months of debriefings and verification. The FBI agent had eventually become an unexpected ally in Mary's transition back to civilian life. As the gathering dispersed, Mary found herself alone with the massive Boeing 777 that had been the stage for her reemergence into the world. She placed her hand on its metallic surface, feeling the connection between her past and present. Mary Smith had found a way to balance the ghost she had been with the woman she wanted to be. Forging a new legend, one not just of sacrifice and secrecy, but of hope, resilience, and the power of stepping out of the shadows when the world needs you most.